Hey guys, this is going to be the first video of several videos on the series of finally finishing the E30. We're finally at a point after 6 years of owning this thing where I have the equipment, the space, and now the time to build this the way that I wanted to build it and not kind of half-ass portions of it just to get it on the road. You're gonna see a lot of changes. If you guys don't know the history of the car, we can kind of get into it as we go through the series, but it went from the inline 6 M20 to a turbo 302, which never got put into a car, to a turbo 5.3 LS base motor, which never got put in the car, back to a turbo M20, which was a 2.7 liter Ceta. It's all finished, ready to go, was actually in the car, but never ran. We pulled it out. First roll cage I ever did, and so that'll be one of the things here over the next month or two. We're gonna be pulling that out. While it's functional and it'll probably do its job, we've kind of decided that this is not gonna be a 100% dedicated track car. This is going to be a very trackable street car, something that I can get in and I can drive around if I want to have fun with it, or I can take it to the track. So we're going to be pulling the full cage out and just putting in a roll bar so I can still run fixed backs, run harnesses, but is much more street friendly. The tube chassis front end was set up for the M20 with an intercooler for the turbo setup. So there'll be some changes coming to the front end because we don't need an intercooler anymore. We actually have an L76, I guess what you would call an LS3 variation underneath there that we're going to be building for the car, which is going to be coupled to a CD009 6-speed out of the Nissan 350 G35 cars. Fun things planned for the induction system, some fun things planned for the exhaust system, but we'll get into that. We are working with MRT out of Finland. Nico over there makes some killer suspension components for the E30, so we will be taking off the E36M control arms and the SLR adjustable cabs. That stuff will be for sale if anybody's interested. It's brand new, it's just been sitting on the car, but it's never been driven on. And we're going with a fully adjustable track setup. The quality of the parts are just amazing. CNC milled products, ARP fasteners, stainless steel. It's going to be a nice setup, so we're really excited to get that on the car. Going up underneath into the back, we've already dropped the rear suspension. That's going to be the first thing that we start playing with in this video series. I have a pretty specific look on how I want this car to sit when it's on the ground. I want it to be low, but I want it to be aggressive, and anybody that knows E30s knows that the rear suspension on these cars are a bit ancient. And even when these were in the DTM series back in the 80s, BMW knew that, and so they did a few things to give the rear suspension some more adjustment. And so we actually got a hold of a kit, which we'll go show you here in just a second, that will allow us to get this car to sit where we want it to and not destroy tires, because we just have some ridiculous toe and camber issues. So we got that all pulled out. The suspension on the car is from Stance. It's just a single adjustable. I had it put together by a shop out of Chicago. So it's actually valved for the E30. The front actually is Swift with helper springs. Integrated strut assembly up underneath where the towers are tied together all the way down into the diff. And then we upgraded the medium diff 188mm case with the Esr 36 rear diff cover that has the twin ears on it, so that we can tie that all into the chassis. This entire vehicle has been on a rotisserie, completely stripped. Every single seam up underneath the entire chassis has been stitch welded, inside and out, including the engine bay. So it's super rigid chassis. Should be a lot of fun. The Esr wheels are going away. Those are actually sold. We have some new wheels and new tire package coming that are a bit more aggressive, hence the suspension work that we're doing to make sure everything fits right, looks good, and functions correctly. So what we have here is the rear setup that has been on the car, and then we have a donor subframe that we are going to modify. And the reason we're going to modify is we'll get into a little bit. I did the standard eccentric upgrade, but to get the car to sit where I want, I was still having too many issues with excessive camber and toe, and that's just not my thing. I think the tires should sit flat on the ground. Minimal camber, but not excessive. But I wanted to use these control arms, so I got a donor. We had a little fun with the hubs before we put everything in, and as you can see, they are dual drilled. So this allows us to run a 114 or a 120 by 5 bolt pattern. We also did a ton of reinforcing to the actual trail arm too, to allow for the coil on shock suspension to get everything beefed up, since all your load is going to be placed back here now rather than on this point here. The thing that we're going to be doing different is we have these Dtm Style Adjusters. This here will basically control your camber, and what you'll see is this is somewhat of an assembled product. You have a heim joint that sits inside of here. This will get welded to your control arm. Then you have a spacer that will run through it and take the place of the a spacer, and then your hardware will run through there. What this does is it allows you to control your toe on the actual heim joint in and out here, and then by rotating this piece here, it allows you to adjust your camber. And rather than the 6 or 7 degrees that you get with the standard eccentric setup, you get almost 1.5 inches if you want. To eliminate binding, what you have to do then on the back side, cut the control arm there. They have a sleeve which has a spherical bearing, sits inside there. Snap ring goes in to hold that into place, and then you have 2 misalignment bushings on either side that will sit, and then that will allow you to have more camber adjustment than you normally would to allow the vehicle to sit where you want. And so that can bring the entire chassis down on top of the suspension and get it to sit where I want it to sit. So what you guys are going to see in this first video is the process of applying the DTM adjustment setup to this, and it's pretty in-depth. There's prep work that has to happen to the new subframe, since we're going to kind of leave the old subframe with the eccentrics for somebody else that can use that. There's fixtures that have to be made to hold everything in place on the trailing arm in reference to the subframe, so that when we cut stuff off and we add new components, we don't lose our frame of reference. And then the next thing will be then throwing it back up underneath the car, getting the new wheel and tire package on there, getting all the suspension set up, front and rear, including the MRT stuff. And then from there, what we'll do is we'll be able to start making the body adjustments for the wheel and suspension clearance. So quite a few things that we have to do from a suspension standpoint, but then after that, we'll probably roll into the roll cage. Reason being, we want to get that cut out. We want to have the seats here that we're going to be using, because when we start setting the engine and the transmission, our goal is to push that back in the car as far as possible to get that weight into the center of the vehicle. It should be a lot of fun. We have 95% of everything we need to make it happen right now. Time's just going to be the biggest factor, but our goal is to be pretty proactive on the project, get stuff put together, and get this car on the road for 2018. And I know I've been saying that every January since 2012, but we're pretty confident it's going to happen this year. So stay tuned, should be a good episode.